¿Qué tal? Muy buenas noches. Te saluda Genaro Lozano. Bienvenido a Foro Global, el espacio de Foro TV especializado en temas internacionales. Noche de viernes, noche de conversaciones globales, y en esta ocasión está con nosotros Yusra Khan, embajador de Indonesia en México. Vamos a conversar sobre temas como protección civil ante acontecimientos recientes y sobre todo la relación bilateral Indonesia-México. Acompáñanos y empezamos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta noche de Conversaciones Globales, en esta ocasión con el embajador Yusra Khan. Él representa a Indonesia en México desde febrero del 2015. Previamente se desempeñó como representante permanente alterno de su país ante Naciones Unidas en Nueva York. También desempeñó sus labores diplomáticas en la sede de la ONU en Ginebra, en Canadá y en Australia, además de distintos cargos en Indonesia. Es abogado por la Dallas University y doctor honoris causa por la Academia Mexicana de Derecho Internacional. Ambassador Yusra, welcome to Foro Global.
Thank you for having me.
First, let me offer you my condolences for the earthquake and the victims that you had in Indonesia. Of course, also the tsunami and the volcano that just erupted. We share in Mexico and Indonesia these tragedies, these natural disasters. What has been the major lessons that you have learned in your country for the protection of people suffering natural disasters, the civil protection?
Thank you very much. First of all, we have the big disaster happened in 2005 in Aceh tsunami. It's known worldwide, and then it's become what's so called as the big momentum, as the big laboratorium for the world to explore and how do we cope with the big scale of the natural disasters. And from that on, we keep rolling and building our strong institutions and adding our budgets to covering, to address the many issues with regard to the natural disasters. Like, for example, how we build the strong institutions, and then how we then prove that within the parliament can adopt the budget nationally to cover the natural disaster that happened in Indonesia. As you may know, that Indonesia is a country, one of the most country, which is lie within the so-called that ring of fire, meaning that we receive a lot of and very natural disasters throughout the years, naming like earthquake, tsunami, hurricane, we have twister also, floods, landslide, and many other more that we have. Like lately, you also follow the last natural disaster that hit one of the islands in the eastern part of Indonesia, which is Sulawesi, Central Sulawesi. Actually, not only earthquake and tsunami, but also the mud coming from the earth and submerged two of the village in Indonesia. This is show how we have to build more our system, our strengths to cope with the natural disaster, especially in enhancing our capacity in this regard.
Many people in Mexico followed those news and showed their condolences to the Indonesian people on social media, through social media. Ambassador, you also face one of the biggest problems of humankind, which is global warming, climate change, in such a form that you actually have to move your capital city, Jakarta, because it's kind of sinking because of the rise of waters and the global warming situation. Do you already know where the new capital is going to be?
I didn't know for sure, but there was a number of discussions taking place, not only now, but since the beginning of our day after our independence. The president already have in mind, the former president, our first president Sukarno, to move the capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan. They call it Samarinda. But it didn't happen up until now. But then the discussion have been rolling during the previous regime also, which thinking that Jakarta is too heavy. The carrying capacity is too much. So then we need to have administrative city function as a capital of Indonesia. But we did not decide it yet up until now. We hopefully, if the government then come into a decision, we will know what is the name of the capital, the new capital.
Sure. There's also another problem caused by global warming, which is the displacement of people, forced displacement of people who used to live in cities next to the coast and that they have to move because of the waters that are rising. And again, what is Indonesia doing to help these people who are being forced, displaced by the natural warmth of the earth?
Actually, what we are doing now is, especially when we talk about Jakarta city, because Jakarta has the serious concern about these matters. What we are doing now is the governments work together, provincial and national government indeed, to have a project. The project building like a giant seawall for the Jakarta Bay, the area which is precisely predicted will be a catastrophe if we don't deal with it at this time. Besides that, we also built a facility, we call it a giant pump, just to cope with the flood or during the monsoon. And the other thing what we are doing now is also we deal with the most populated river which flow from the province of the West Java to Jakarta. And this is one of the policy of the government that are now being carried on, especially to prevent the possibility of problem of Jakarta, which you say as a sinking city. But we know the government thinks thoroughly and work with the expert and the experienced government like Netherlands in this project. This project will take place for 7 years and hopefully will be finished in the 5 years to come.
That's very interesting. Let me make a very brief pause, and then when we come back, we'll talk about the relationship between Mexico and Indonesia. No te vayas, hacemos una muy breve pausa. Al regresar, seguiremos conversando con el embajador de Indonesia en México, el señor Yusra Khan. Muchas gracias por continuar con nosotros en esta conversación global de viernes, en esta ocasión con Yusra Khan, embajador de Indonesia en México. Ambassador, Mexico and Indonesia are partners in MICTA, Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, South Korea, Turkey and Australia. What do Mexico and Indonesia share as common goals in this association?
Firstly, since we invent these organizations or this group, we have some concern, common concern about the crisis, the global crisis that struck the world in 2008. And we are the country which has almost the same GDP, and the GDP grows. We are thinking to share our experience in coping with the global economic crisis, global financial crisis. That was the first idea, and how we cope with the issue of the global financial. And indeed, from that on, we are rolling to tackle the issue which happens globally. For example, like issue of the humanitarian, issue of cultural, issue of migration, issue of peace and stability, and also women issue as well, especially. So, since this is the new organizations that we built together, but yet we see that the possibility for us to enhance our activity and make our presence contribute to the global our challenge nowadays. As I mentioned to you before, some of the issues that we are tackling. Now Indonesia is the chairman of the MICTA, and throughout this 2018, we are doing some activities which is making the MICTA more known by a global community. Like for example, now for the first time we are launching the book of MICTA together with all the MICTA countries, the current situation and the MICTA forward. It will tell everyone who read the book about how has the MICTA evolved from the early beginning of the initial activities. And in Indonesia also, we start to do the socialization of the MICTA, like the program for MICTA Goes to Campus. And we make a cultural program, culinary program of the MICTA country to introduce all of the richness of each of the MICTA members to Indonesia and to all of the MICTA countries. And we also this year are going to have interfaith and cultural dialogue in Indonesia, and follow with the combat terrorism workshop, which is the most pertinent issue in the past and still nowadays, that we need also to have a common goals together to give our contributions to the international fora.
Mexico also is trying to diversify its economy. It's looking for new partners, looking for new markets, especially in Southeast Asia. And for that reason, Mexico recently, Mexico has been an advocate of free trade and also of the TPP, now extinct, but Mexico joined the CPTPP. Why is Indonesia not in negotiations to enter the CPTPP? Is Indonesia not interested in joining this community of market economies?
In 2015, during the APEC meeting in Manila, our president already stated his intention to become a member of the TPP at that time. But you know, the TPP is still in the process of happening. So the discussion among the core member is not yet done. But for sure that Indonesia is in the waiting list for that. We hope that in the next batch, we can jump into the member of the TPP. Actually, we were offered before by the country like New Zealand to become the TPP, but the changing of the government happened in Indonesia, and so many other issues cope with the new government, making the Indonesia is a little bit late in thinking to jump into the wagon of the TPP at that time. But as a player within the Southeast Asia, you know, we have the organization there, we call it ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Indonesia playing the bigger role there, since we have 1/3 of the GDP of the total 10 country members of the ASEAN, and about more than 1/3 of the population there. And we are now also striving to the ASEAN economic community, where now, beginning in 2016, January, we are borderless in terms of the immigration, in terms of building the trade relations and the center of the productions within the ASEAN countries. So for us, this is a big opportunities for the Mexico also to join the ASEANs, where you can have the access to the 669 people of the 10 member countries within the region. And you know that the ASEAN is, I think, the most stable sub-regional organizations in the world up until now. Since we inception, up until now, we managed to work together, to move steadily and evolve until the current development right now.
I see. Let me make a second brief pause, and when we come back, we'll continue talking about Mexico and Indonesia. Okay. Vamos a hacer una nueva pausa. Al regresar, continuaremos esta conversación de viernes con el embajador de Indonesia en México, señor Yusra Khan. No te vayas, esto es Foro Global. gracias por continuar con nosotros en esta conversación global de viernes, que en esta ocasión con el embajador Yusra Khan, embajador de Indonesia en nuestro país aquí en México. Ambassador, we were talking about the commercial intentions, the commercial relation between Mexico and Indonesia, both between through MICTA and also through APEC. And also you mentioned the intentions of Indonesia to join the TPP, and that's an ongoing discussion. But let me talk a little bit more about the bilateral relationship between Mexico and Indonesia, because we know that Indonesia is one of the most populous countries in the world. It's going to become among the five most populous countries of the world, according to the UN, very soon. And Mexico, as I said, is looking to diversify its markets, is looking for partners, looking for allies, also at the United Nations, and etc. And the next government of Mexico, which is going to be headed by President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he had already met with many ambassadors from Asia, including yourself, of course. How did you perceive the interest of the next administration in Southeast Asia and in Indonesia in particular?
Indeed, we see the intentions of extending the relation with the other part of the traditional trading partner of Mexico, which is North America and Latin America. And I just sense the nuance strongly that Mexico will also grab the opportunity that is happening now in the ASEAN, especially in my country as well, because we had a chance to talk with the president-elect that he is willing, besides to build the Mexico itself, but also to extend and to get some opportunities, mutual benefit indeed with the country like in Indonesia. So we see that so far, since we already built the stronger and better relation with the Mexico, there is no impediment for us to get and moving into the next step, which is enhancing and increasing our trade volume, our investments, two-way traffic, and our tourism sectors, which in fact already have the basics, the fundamental that have been built since the first time we opened our diplomatic relations. As you may know, that we start to open our diplomatic relations about 6.5 decades ago, and our president have been visited Mexico for 3 times, in 1959, 60, and 61. And from there on, we know that the message that brought by our president from Mexico to Indonesia is pretty significant. Why I said that? Because we have the Mexican school in Indonesia right now, and we have the cooperation with one of the steel industry from Monterrey to Indonesia, to our icon industry, our first industry in steel in Indonesia. We call it Krakatau Steel. They have the capacity building corporations to work together, even to bring some of the expertise from Mexico and work in our Krakatau Steel in Indonesia to build the first relations in the industrial side. And even Mexico also at that time bring the Mexican school to Indonesia and to Cilegon, not only to Jakarta for the first time, but also to Cilegon, where the Mexican bring the expert and the family to work within the Krakatau Steel. So that's one of the first example that we heard from Mexico. Not only that, I can say to you that the song of La Cucaracha is very popular during my kindergarten. Wow. I did not realize that this song came from Mexico. But then when I came here, I know that this song is from Mexico. And some of the culture from Mexico have been known by the Indonesian people during the past decades, which not many of us know that this is originally from Mexico.
Wow.
So I think we have the common interests, the common cultures, and the value that have been brought by the two leaders in the past as a modality for us to bring up into the next step of our relation, even with the new governments of President AMLO.
Well, Ambassador, it's been a privilege having you at the show. Please come back soon to talk more about Indonesia and politics and the relation between the two countries. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a ti por habernos acompañado esta noche en Foro Global. Soy Genaro Lozano. Te invito para que continúes con la programación de Foro TV. Te veo el domingo en punto a las 11 de la noche para la mesa de debate de Sin Filtro y el próximo lunes de nueva cuenta para Foro Global. Por lo pronto, muy buenas noches.